Thank you all for being here. This is Native and the Counter Cafe have kindly provided Lighthouse with this outpost on the other side of town. So if you are Southsiders like us, thank you for making the trip. And to everyone who is watching at home, I thank you to you as well for being with us. It is such a treat to be welcoming this formidable duo who, as a fellow queer and small business owner and somebody who is passionate about community, seeing you from afar has been a great source of inspiration and hope that it is possible and that people are connecting with that message. So will you, before we kick off with questions, and then you will also have time for questions, will you all join me in saying a very warm welcome and putting your hands together for Aimie and Kiera?
Oh, thank you.
Oh, I feel emotional.
Thank you everyone for joining. Really, really appreciate it. It's so nice to... We've arrived in Edinburgh and it's the first time that I've been here and it's absolutely amazing. We got here last night, didn't we? And just felt so welcome. So it's a beautiful city and thank you for coming. We had no idea how many people were going to come. We're in Manchester and living in our own little bubble there. So we really appreciate you coming out.
I didn't realise people knew was this far up north, so thank you.
We do positivity in Scotland.
I can tell. The city is full of it. It feels so nice.
You've got free sunglasses today. That's how
Yeah,
nice you are.
someone gave me some sunglasses today. It was so kind.
Why were you buying sunglasses in Scotland?
We bought the weather today.
Well, we went to a charity shop and I got a new coat and then I bought loads of stuff and then I tried these sunglasses on, but I wasn't entirely sure. And the person was like, you can take them as a gift from Scotland. So, yeah, it was very nice.
Can I get a show of hands for anyone who lives here? Have you ever experienced that? No. It's okay. Yeah. No, I know you're here. Yeah. No, I think it's just you. I wanted to kick things off by asking you both to tell us who you were before Feel Good Club. How did you end up here?
Who were we before Feel Good Club? I no longer remember. So Feel Good Club actually started from who I was prior to Feel Good Club. So I was actually working, trying to get a record deal. That was like my thing that I started from being a young kid. And then when I went to uni, suffered with an eating disorder, which I was experiencing for about 10 years. But it had always, now I look back and it was always there in my life, but it really came out when I went to uni, when we met, that's where we first met. And when I'd moved to Manchester, Aimie and I got our own apartment and I was still focused on music, but the eating disorder side of things, I was going in and out of recovery and realized that actually I just needed something positive to focus on. Music was no longer a positive focus for me, it was actually more damaging. So I started Feel Good Club from our tiny little studio apartment. I remember being sat on the floor and thinking, what am I going to do? I need something positive. And Instagram was in its very early days. This was like 2010, it had just come out. So I was like, I'm going to start a page and I'm going to start making some candles and I'm just going to start talking about my journey and try and spread some positivity. At that point, it was extremely cheesy, the messages that I was writing. Aimie loves to remind me and shows me.
Every now and again I'll find one and
It's like, grow your grass and grow your garden. And it's... But I'd started making these candles and it was really starting to help, and just being open about how I was feeling and what I was going through was starting to help. But when I say it was a tiny studio apartment, it was tiny. We had one hob that I was making the candles on, and I was using we had one pan, and I was using the same pan that we were cooking pasta in. So Aimie was getting home from work, and yeah, she was like, "Is that wax?" No, it's wax. So I left that behind, and Feel Good Club kind of sat on the side for many years. I then got a job as Director of Happiness and People and this was for a social media marketing agency, and had no idea what that was. I remember Googling it, being like, what is head of happiness? How do I be this? But the company that it was in its very early form, there was 12 people at the time, and the guy who owns it, a guy called Steve Bartlett, you may have seen him on like Dragon's Den and stuff now, he just said, I want to create a really lovely working environment for people that come here. So then I started... So I was doing that for 5 years, and one of my main focuses there was bringing mental health and talking about mental health into the workplace. So we ended up providing like a company therapist and all these wonderful things, but we'd got to this point where I was really in love with what I was doing. I was able to go to work, I was supporting and helping people, and I was doing something that I felt made a difference. And you'd become quite bored with your day job, hadn't you?
Whilst Kiera was like, oh, we've had avocado day in the office today, and like, oh, we've just built a slide of a ball pit when you go down to work. And I'm like in this plain office, 9 to 5 sales role with like a water fountain in the corner. That was like the most exciting part of my day, was like watching the bubbles in the machine go up. And I hated my job. It was a really good job, it was comfortable, but I didn't want to be comfortable. Like the whole concept of Feel Good Club was like stepping outside your comfort zone. So once I was like just not happy at all. So I said to Kiera, we're going to travelling, we're selling the house, I'm sick of this life, we're leaving, I'm leaving. And Kiera was like, no, like why don't we start Feel Good Club? So we was literally sat in a bar, and Kiera said to me, if we do X, I can't remember what it was now, but if we reach this and reach that for the Feel Good Club within like 6 months, we will stay and we'll carry on with the business. If we don't, we'll go travelling. So we shook hands. 6 months later, the business just blew up, and I was like, oh, okay. We'll stay. So yeah, I decided to quit my full-time job. Had no idea what I was doing. Had a little tiny room in our house. Sat there day one and was like, okay, how do I start a business? Google. Yeah, that'll be a running theme throughout this chat. And then yeah, we just started it. I just quit my job, decided to go for it. We lived off Kiera's salary for like a year. Ate beans and toast most days, but had this passion to do it, and that's where it was. That's how we started.
I love this, that you existed before you existed, but also that the two of you as a pair are really such a big part of how Feel Good Club could exist. And so one of the things that comes across beautifully in the book that felt distinctive for a sort of quote-unquote self-help book was that different things work for you in different ways, and the book very much offers space for like, this really worked for me, or this was my struggle and this was not my struggle, and this is how. Can you talk a little bit about what it is to be in that kind of a partnership, and then how that then materialized into a book that is a single thing? You didn't write the beginning and the other person had the other half.
Yeah, I think so.
The conversation right at the beginning, it was like, how did two people, like having two names on the book in itself, it was like, how did we do that? Because we are completely different. We're chalk and cheese. We're completely different people.
But I think that all comes down to kind of what, and we had this conversation earlier, I said it fits in a self-help category of a book, but what we didn't want to do was write something that was, because we're not professionals, we talk about mental health, and we talk about mental health as it's something that we all have. We have it every day, like physical health. It's the same thing. And what we want to try and normalise is talking about that before it gets to a point where, you know, if you'd broken your leg, you wouldn't walk on it until you could no longer walk on it. We want to normalise talking about mental health so that it doesn't get to that crisis point. But going back to the question, I think the book talks a lot about that what works for one person, we're all completely different, and what works for one person isn't going to work for anybody else. So what we didn't want to do in the book is say, in order to feel good, you need to do this, or you should do this. What we wanted to do, and why it's called A Guide to Feeling Good and Being Okay with It When You're Not, is that in life, we're going to have good days, we're going to have bad days, and we're going to have a lot of days that are just in between, and we're not really feeling too much of either. And that's okay, and it's being comfortable with that. And for me, that is the goal as someone who has suffered with their mental health, that is the goal for me. It isn't about being happy every single day, because I know that's not sustainable. It's about just being okay with it when I'm not, and being able to talk about that. So, and like you say, we are chalk and cheese. We are completely different people, and what works for Aimie doesn't always work for me, and what works for me doesn't always work for Aimie. So writing the book was an interesting process, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'm like super OCD with like, I have spreadsheets for like, monthly spreadsheets of like the petrol, the electric, the dog food, our insurance, like.
Into the studio apartment together, we sat in my parents' lounge where Aimie had created this spreadsheet.
Colour-coded, might I add.
And sat down with my mom and was like, right, we're not moving in together until I know that we can cover this part, we can cover, and it's great because I'm terrible with any sort of organisation. We'd never do a food shop, we'd have no money.
So when it comes to writing the book, I was like, we need to start at like day one. We've got like 12 months, but we need to start like right now. It needs to start right now. And Kiera's at the moment
In the process of being diagnosed with ADHD, so there's a lot of things at the moment that are becoming very clear to me throughout my whole life. Oh, sorry to us. Okay, you've got a year to write it. You have to have the first draft in by this date. I was like, I can't do that. I can't. It's got to be like a week before, and then my brain will kick into gear, and I'll know what's happening. But Aimie was sat there for the whole year going, Kiera, sit down now. We need to write it. We need to get started. And
my spreadsheet says on Friday the 14th of May, we should be on page 2 and we're not there yet. So we was completely, so eventually we was like, maybe I should start the chapters, like what the chapter's going to be, what we're going to talk about. And then literally 9 days before handing, Kiera decided she would fill the rest of the book in. And that's exactly what happened. I was like, literally at home, and then Kiera was just like, da, 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 da. So that is,
and it was great.
Eventually we found out our strengths and weaknesses and worked with that.
And that's been the theme of the whole business, is that everything that we've actually done with Feel Good Club, we've not had any experience in. Even, you know, I worked in a social media agency, but I was people. I had no idea how they were doing what they were doing. I was just watching from afar like, that's great. And starting a hospitality business, we worked together in the student union bar. That's the extent of our hospitality experience. Creating the clothing that we made, and that was the first thing we did. So the merch stuff came first, and we learned literally as we released the clothing how to screen print, how to sew, with our mate on FaceTime from New York saying, no, you're doing that wrong, you're doing this wrong. So we've had to learn everything on the job, but it's been fun. I wouldn't have it any other way.
Clearly, it works. It works for you. One of the things, sort of touching on that, is you say you're not professionals, in terms of being not mental health professionals and not having a background in psychology or medicine. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about either the research that went into the book or where you go and seek expert advice and what it is to navigate putting advice into the world for vulnerable people when you don't have that background.
Yeah, I think it is a scary thing to do. I mean, we were having this conversation with Richie earlier as well, that we didn't ever expect Feel Good Club to grow as much as it has, especially from like a following point of view online. It was literally something that we sat down one evening and said, let's try it again and see if it'll work. And as I said, it was a positive outlet for me and something positive to focus on. And it was actually one day where we grew about 100,000 followers overnight, and that was really terrifying for us. We'd just opened the coffee shop and we were going into lockdown again on the Monday, so it was our last Sunday open. And I was in the kitchen and I'd written a post that was 5 things you should hear before going into the second lockdown. And I was literally in the kitchen because we knew we were going into lockdown. We didn't have any staff, so I was the chef. I was making avocado on toast. We had a dog party happening for our dog's first birthday party. And I glanced at my phone.
Fancy dress as well, so there was 20 dogs dressed as like spiders and Superman. And Kiera was making avocado and toast. I'm pretending to know what to do on this coffee machine. I had no idea.
I glanced at my phone and there was millions of notifications And I looked at WhatsApp, and all of my friends were like screenshotting like Mrs. Hinch and Gemma Stiles and all of these huge
Harry
people.
Styles' sisters shared your post. We were like,
who were sharing it. And I was like, whoa, what has happened? And we went home, and I was like, right, we're no longer talking to like 10,000 people. We're talking to like 110,000 people. And that was really scary. And that was the point where we had to turn around and say, well, the advice that we're given, and I'd say advice as a loose term, it's more talking about our lived experience, and it is what we try and do every day. Rather than give specific advice around mental health, it's trying to make people feel less alone. So it's just starting that conversation of how you feel and signposting people to organisations and charities that you can go to. We've both had therapists, luckily, as well, where we can kind of discuss ideas and get some advice and signpost people when...
What the page is supposed to do. Like when people comment on the posts that Kiera makes every single morning, might I add. She doesn't pre-do them. She wakes up every morning and writes individual posts every morning, which still blows my mind whilst I'm in bed. But like when people see each other's comments on there saying like, oh, I felt this today, it makes you two go, oh, I'm feeling the same. And oh, it's not just me who feels this way right now. You're also feeling that way. And that's exactly what we're trying to do. The more you normalise it and talk to strangers, the more it's going to be normalised in the world that we're in now. So it's not really advice. It's more just like making people aware that like you're not the only one going through that.
Picking up on that, you do touch on a few terms that you sort of rightly go, there's a lot of buzz around, or there's the buzzword that is, yeah. Community being one. In the book, boundaries is another one, overthinking. You touch on a few ways our brains work, and we're so exposed to the language around self-help that it sometimes feels that it becomes devoid of meaning, and everyone feels like they can say that's a toxic relationship, or that's an abusive behavior, or they're a sociopath, or that's bipolar disorder. People who are not in any way equipped to make judgments about other people's mental health. And there's a lot of clarity in the book about like, here are everyday experiences that you should have a chance to be able to just navigate. Can you maybe talk a little bit in terms of definition and why specifically you included them in your book, on things like boundaries being one of them? And I have notes. There were a few. I'll let you start with boundaries, and then I'm gonna.
I think that's it. It's because it is such a buzzword. It is all over, and I think it is that way because of social media. We do have access to so much information now, and it is a buzzword, boundaries. But that's what everybody knows it as. So you almost get into this position where you have to use that phrase and you have to talk about that, because otherwise people won't necessarily know what you're talking about. But boundaries are something that have existed forever. It's being able to say when you're uncomfortable with something, or no to something. Even at the weekend, saying no to a friend that maybe you don't want to go out 3 nights in a row, or you don't want to go out tonight, and that's what it is. But it has become this buzzword of, we must all have boundaries, but it's really fucking hard to have boundaries. It's so
Beep.
hard. Yeah. Beep, sorry. It's really hard to have all of these things because, I think we are, and people pleasing is another buzzword. But it is, yeah, but that's what it is. And I think we are naturally, from my experience, we all want to be liked. As much as people say, oh, I don't care what people think of me, or I don't care about this, we naturally do want to be liked. And it is really difficult, which is why we talk about it in the book, that it isn't this new thing that you must have and all of a sudden be comfortable with having. And if you don't have a boundary, or you are a people pleaser, then it's bad. And it's kind of, I think we wanted to highlight those phrases and highlight those words that have become buzzwords and talk about them in a more natural way.
very handy book had a note section at the back where I
We made it
included
just for
my
you.
notes as I was going. I was like, oh yes, this, must ask them about this. Yeah, there it is, boundaries, buzzword. Self-care.
Another one.
Yeah. What does that mean to you? What are you talking about in the book when you're talking about self-care?
So we see all this stuff around self-care, and I think it's used...
Not face masks and
it's used
lovely baths.
It's used in a very commercialised way as well. Self-care, buy this bath bomb, buy this candle. But I think self-care, it isn't just about... it isn't just about baths and candles and putting your dressing gown on. It can be, because that is a form of looking after yourself when you need it. But I think self-care is choosing to do things and being in situations that fulfills you most.
For me, self-care is like learning to know you. That's the biggest thing from Feel Good Club that I've learned, is to be myself. I think for probably 5 years ago, how old are we now? Probably like 30 years of being on this planet, I had no idea who I was. And then when I started looking into self-care, of like actually setting, like, it sounds again like this is the word, the boundaries word, but like for me, setting those boundaries that I never had. I was always a people pleaser. I just went around life pleasing everybody. And then when I started to figure out like what makes me feel good, mind the word there. When I started to actually sit down and go to myself, like, who am I as a person? What makes me feel good? Who do I want to surround myself with? What relationships do I want? Where do I want to work? What's my goals? That to me is self-care, like learning to know you as a person. And then once you know you, I think it's a nicer place to be, because you know yourself. Do you know what I mean? That for me is self-care. And then I'll have a bath with a face mask on a Friday night.
But I also think as well is that, like, who you are as a person and your interests and your needs and what makes you feel good changes over time as well, and being able to acknowledge that, recognize it, and be comfortable with it as well, and not feeling like it's a bad thing if what you enjoy changes. And you know, there's certain situations where that might mean that relationships are different for you because who you are as a person has changed. So I think we're constantly on this journey of finding out who we are, and the more that we put ourselves in situations where we meet different people and we're learning about different things, you learn more about yourself and what you like and what you don't like ultimately.
Many things I want to unpack in that. Capitalism and self-care and comparison is one of the things that comes up. I mean, envy is a very natural emotion, and it's sort of put on steroids by social media. Our whole world is looking into other people's curated lives. And you two are extremely successful. You are young, young and cool and doing cool things.
Social media might tell you.
And I wonder how you navigate exactly that space of where the imperative to sell ideas of well-being to the world versus having a relationship with yourself that doesn't then go into the wider world through platforms like social media.
I think the first thing is that we're always very honest. So rather than showing, and this book as well, where if you read it, you'll realize that actually a lot of the things that we talk about are the things that have gone wrong for us and the things that haven't worked out so great. And we try to share more of our down days than we do all the stuff that happens, because you know, you can sit there and from afar see, okay, you opened this 3,000 square foot venue. That's incredible. You must be raking it in. We borrowed the money to do it, and we're always very honest with that is how we got there. There's absolutely no way that we would have been able to do that if someone didn't lend us the money to do it. And also, you don't see that on that first night that we opened, or we do see, because we were honest about it, is that we went home crying, been like, I think we've done the wrong thing here. We have absolutely no idea what we're doing. The first day we opened was hell. The kitchen burnt down because we built it too small, because we didn't have experience. the first day that we released any of our clothing, all the screen printers broke, so we couldn't do it, and we were sat there on the stairs, Aimie crying. I can see
Continuous
it
thinking
now.
where I just cry and go, what have we done? I did it last week. What, are we still okay? Are we still doing this?
And Amy sat there on the stairs going, this is a stupid idea, let's not do it, let's not do it. And I think that's where we're very honest. I would never be posting on social media all of the highs without talking about the lows, because actually with all of the highs that come, there are also lows that come along with that. It's never smooth sailing. And it's just, for us, it's just been about pushing through that and trying to find the strength when we felt that we didn't have it, and surrounding ourselves with really great people that have helped us, where we've been able to do that, and we're so honest about that as well. And then I think on the point of kind of selling the idea of wellness and well-being, I think along our journey, what we've realised is that isn't something that can be sold. It's not something that you can sell to people. We make our clothing as very small runs of clothing that we print ourselves, and the idea behind that clothing is that if you're walking down the street with a feel-good beanie on or a feel-good hoodie, and you bump into someone who's also wearing it, it creates that instant connection. And we've had
one of our old regulars will tell you when they lived in Manchester, it happens all the time in Manchester. Everyone's always like, oh my God, Feel Good Club, yeah, Feel Good Club. They just end up chatting and we're like, yay!
There's actually a story of two people who met, they bumped into each other and ended up living together. They were both wearing a Feel Good beanie, and like there's actually people who've created friendships out of that. And then what we do in the physical space as well is putting on events and bringing people together, and you can't sell well-being or wellness. I don't think that's something that can be sold to people.
And people will try and put you into this box. Like when we opened the coffee shop, Manchester Evening News, all these media outlets was putting on titles saying, mental health coffee shop opens in Manchester, and we were like, we're not a mental health coffee shop.
We talk about it.
We talk about it, we normalise the conversation, but we're not what is a mental health coffee shop? What even is that? Like, and everybody came to us like, oh my God, you're that mental health coffee shop. I was like, what is that?
We like, I don't know what that is. Just because we talk about mental health and we talk about feelings, and you get put in this category then that this
and we did that on Instagram. We was like, this is not what we are. Like, we're trying to, that could have been a whole new thing for us, like, oh my God, like Manchester Evening News and all these newspapers are talking about you, but we did the opposite on our social media. We was like, these people are talking about us, but they don't even know what we do. So before you talk about us, come and ask us and we'll tell you what we actually do. So we do try and be as honest as we can, and I think that might be why we're sort of happy.
Following on from that, is this sort of natural evolution that we have as human beings, that we should be able to change our minds, learn new things, be new people. And there's a lot of room for that in the book, for grace towards yourself, for feeling proud of your achievements, for moving on from who you might have been. And there's some wonderful quotes in there about that moving on. And I wonder if you have advice in a world where so much of our thoughts is catalogued and in the public domain, whether that's on Twitter or Instagram, or you said something to someone and it's ended up, it's so searchable. Our past is not, we don't get to leave it behind like past generations. You either reinvent yourself entirely and then hope that nobody digs up what's out there. Can you talk a little bit about what it is to evolve in that landscape, given that you're sort of, as you say, your initial posts are so different from what they are now. Like, what is it to live in that world?
We was talking a little bit like this with Richie today. Rich was like one of our day one Feel Good Clubbers, and we've met like twice. This is the second time today. But we was talking about it today, saying that like it's really, really difficult to have that, like this cancel culture. And for me, it's like I was saying a minute ago, like self-care to me is learning who I am. Who I were 2 months ago is even different now. Like, that's not even an exaggeration. Like, every single day, especially running a business, meeting new people, having the brand that we are, I learn so much so quickly now, which for me is like, oh, amazing. But I think my past is just my past, and we all have a past. It's the past for a reason. It's not who I am today. So if you want to cancel me or dig something up from my past, like, it doesn't change who I am now. So I think that's what I've always just thought. I know it's always going to happen, and you know, you can't stop your past, like you said. But for me, I try not to think about it because I just try and think about who I am today. And as long as you like who I am today, then let's talk. Let's be friends. But who I was 5 years ago is not who I am now. So
there's actually an incredible woman who talks about this on social media a lot, called Africa Brooke, and she's really, really great at talking about your past and moving on from that. And she talks a lot about like this whole idea of cancel culture and our thoughts not being our own. So I'd direct to her because she's brilliant.
I kind of want to bounce it out to you guys a little bit. Is there a burning question? I'll give you a minute to think it through. It's going to be your turn soon. And I'm going to go to my notes bit because I had so many questions that came up through this very tiny book that is sort of... Yeah. It is. It's sort of the pocket-size pal that you get to carry around with you.
We wanted it to be one of those things that you could read as a whole and you could read it all in one go, or you could have it in your bag, and if you're feeling down one day, or there's a specific chapter that you're feeling that day, that you can just flip to it and be like, oh yeah, I'm not the only person who feels this way, or yeah, so that's why it's so small and tiny.
It works. Everything, there's a reason for everything, and it has so brilliantly come together in this. I wonder, one of the things that there is a risk with in the work that you do, and I wonder if you get pushback on that idea with Feel Good Club around toxic positivity, which is a whole check. So can you talk a little bit about what that is, and how, if we want to have conversations about mental health, if we want to support people, how we avoid toxic positivity?
So again, this was one of the reasons we called it a guide to feeling good and being okay with it when you're not, is because of, again, it's a buzzword, toxic positivity. Usually people or books or media outlets or anything like that, there's a lot out there online that will tell you that this is how you should feel, or this is what you need to do to feel this way. And for us, it's one of the main things that we talk about, and everything that we post online is less about how to feel good and more about being okay with how you're feeling, and reminding people that that it isn't sustainable to be happy, or not life. And again, with social media, it can very much seem that way when you have, you know, the world out, like it you know, it could be worse. That's one of the terms. And yeah, I think everything that we do tries to go against that. And I think that the actual feeling good, like I said earlier, is being comfortable with all of my emotions of that, and remind people that you aren't on your own in how you feel, because whilst everybody is different and has different feelings, have different thoughts, we all have bad days, and
learning to ride the wave, basically, is like, if you feel the wave, if you feel sad or, you know, upset or something's happened, and then like just trying to bury it, for me that's toxic positivity. Like learning to ride the wave, like you're going to be upset if, you know, something's happened to you in life, like just learn to ride it instead of just trying to close it off and put it in a book. And you know, that old thing that everyone used to do where you just be like, oh, I'm okay, and then just like bury it. It's never going to go away. So for us, we try and just give advice on like how we rode that wave. Like when all this stuff's happened to us with this business and relationship, like now we go, it's going to be okay. Let's just go with it. It's, at the end of it, it's going to be okay. We don't just go, oh, it's fine, and then to walk around smiling. We're like, it's like we have a cry, we have a chat about it, we talk about it, we talk to our friends about it, talk to people who work for us. We're like, this is a horrible day, isn't it? Yeah, it really is. And then we learn to ride it, and then
but
come
I
out the
still
other
struggle
end.
with that massively, and we talk about it in the book, and we talk about it a lot online as well, is that this book isn't coming from two people who know and do all of the, like, we're okay, we're fine, we don't overthink, we don't do it. Like, no, I'm still learning, and I have as a person, have a real difficulty with allowing myself to feel down. Like, I think because I hid my eating disorder for so long, and I hid how I felt for so long, I became so used to, I'm fine, don't talk about it. And that's still something that I'm working on now. is learning how to not push toxic positivity on myself, learning to be able to sit down and go, something isn't right here, or I need to work on something, or I need to speak to somebody about this. And I've always been that character that loves to help other people. If someone else is struggling, I like to sit with them and support them and listen to how they're feeling. And what I realised when actually in my job at Social Chain, I used to have check-ins with all of the team on a regular basis, and everybody was feeling lots of different ways. And I turned around and said to myself, that, you know, these people are so brave that they can sit here and tell me that, because it was really difficult for me to open up. And that's when I went to therapy. I didn't get any therapy throughout my whole experience with my eating disorder, because I was just hiding it and I was pushing it away. And it was this positive focus that helped me secretly to learn how I was feeling. And then I went and sought help and got therapy and started to take that journey to being all right with having a bad day.
I recognise you.
So these wonderful people here have been to Feel Good Club in Manchester.
Said it was a
Thank you.
terrible breakfast.
And asked when we were going to open in Scotland or Edinburgh. So, and I guess this goes actually a little bit back to the question where we were talking about kind of capitalism and how do we make sure that we don't just grow into this like big beast and you know, go in every single city. That isn't what we want to do. We don't want to. We actually had an opportunity to open in Liverpool, didn't we? And we turned it down because we want to make sure that what we're doing and what we've got in Manchester is 100%, and that we are able to create this space that we've wanted to create and create every single day. And we want to be sure that we can do that in other cities before we branch out. Edinburgh is the first place that we've been to where we literally sat down today and was like,
We're not just saying this because we're here either.
Yeah, we're not.
Like literally Liverpool, Leeds, London, everybody says it and we're like, yeah, maybe.
Yeah, okay.
My next one was just in terms of having moved the business from being online to in person. Would you share sort of one of the sort of great unexpected joys that, or moments that you've had with Feel Good Club in the real world?
Manchester Pride. You know, this just gone in August was our highlight of the club. We created the space because what we want to do, what we do online is where we try and connect people. Like when you see the comments, like I said previously, it makes you feel like, oh, I'm not just the only one. With the physical space, we wanted to create a space where you came and you try to figure out what made you feel good. We have like live drawing, we have queer open mic nights, we have queer quizzes, we have cabaret, we have book clubs, we have all these different things for you to like try out and see what makes you feel good. And for us, the main reason of doing the space was for events and like connecting people in all different, like whoever you are. And during Manchester Pride this year, we had like a full Feel Good Fest on, and we had like panel talks from like all different types of people. We had music on, it was literally cabaret in the evening, panel talks in the daytime, and we literally stood there and was like, I had a little tear, I cry all the time, but this was I had a little tear and I was like, this is why we created the space, like the buzz and the feeling and all these like different diverse people in one space was like, that is why we wanted to do it.
It was literally like walking into the vision board that we had. It was unreal, and we kind of sat back, so we had panel talks from queers in business, we had queer black joy, we had women and non-binary people in music, we had cabaret, and it was a full day of all of these super important discussions that were happening within the space, and it was the fullest we've ever been. And we turned around and we was like, one, this is what Pride should be. Like, it's not all just about going and getting pissed in the village.
Beep.
which is fun. But there should also be these important conversations about history and about what's happening now within the queer community. And yeah, it was unreal, wasn't it? And that, like, we're still like buzzing off that.
To be honest, we was nervous about having those conversations in your venue because you're like, oh, am I doing enough? Like, the first thing you do is point at yourself. And, you know, everyone on these panel talks like, we don't have enough stages around Manchester and people don't accept us. But every single one of the speakers was saying, like, how welcome they felt in this space and, like, how they've previously done work for us before Manchester Pride. And for us, that was like, oh, we actually are doing the job and being authentic in what we're doing because we're not just doing it because it's Manchester Pride.
Yeah.
So it made us feel really, really, really proud of ourselves, which, again, we have this issue of saying, I don't know why, as a society, we always, even when I went to say it, I was like, don't say proud, but I am. I'm proud of that day. So, yeah, it was a really good day.
And then again, whenever we run any of our events, like, it is the highlight, seeing people come together in the space. And I think because we opened in the pandemic, we literally had 2 weeks open before we went into lockdown. So we spent the whole year, literally, us two and one of our other team members, Jess, who is phenomenal, just serving coffees from behind the counter, having a little conversation with people who were coming in. But to have this dream and this idea that you were going to create this space that was going to have all of these things happening within it, and then suddenly close the doors and be like, shit, we can't do anything now, and we can't get any support because we were such a new business. We didn't like qualify for furlough or anything, so we were kind of like, oh, okay, this is it, done. It was good 2 weeks, but it's done. So then to like be able to have the events and to see people enjoying the space, and like we sit in there, like we up until when the book was published, we were still working on the floor in there pretty much every single day and loved it, and we still do bits here and there, but we're in there every single day anyway. And I think seeing people come in, meeting people who have followed the brand, and then come into the physical space, I think we're still catching up with ourselves. I don't think we've really like took it in yet or had too much of a step back to go, wow, this is what we wanted to make, and it's there. I think sometimes
putting out fires every day. It's like I'm on a treadmill.
I think sometimes you get caught up in like what the next goal should be or what the next thing should be, which is easy to do when you're passionate about something and you want to keep growing it. But what we are realizing is that you have to take a step back and go, no, actually it's good. And that can be for anything in your life. Like, no, I'm doing good. I'm doing something that I wanted to do, and then I'm doing it. And then I'm going to give myself time, and then we'll go for what's next.
Anyone, Charlie? Oh, yeah, come on.
I arrived a bit late, so I don't know if you have already said something about this, but how long did it take you to go from the ideation stage to actually open up the shop? And do you have any highlights of like that process? Like, are there any events that happen or any feedback that you got during those times that actually motivated you to continue in those first instances?
So the question for anyone at home from Aimie was about the journey from and how long and the milestones between concept and idea and then the real thing happening.
So it's really funny, the business actually started. Kiera sat me down, we both sat down because I was unhappy with my job, and I was like, oh, we need to change this. So we was like, oh, we should start Feel Good Club up. So we just come up with the name, come up with the concept, let's start selling some clothes. So the next day I went back into my 9-to-5 job, and I got an email, this is not even a lie, got an email from Airbnb saying, we owe you a £500 refund. So I was like, you don't owe me a £500 refund, it's a scam. So I just kept ignoring it. For 2 weeks, they kept emailing me, asking me for my bank details to give you this money back, and I just completely ignored it. After 2 weeks, they just put £500 in my bank account, and I was like, oh, okay, it's not a scam.
We're going to pay them back one day.
Yeah, still haven't paid them back. So I literally come home to Kiera, like ran home and was like, oh my God, we've got £500. Like, I think it's meant to be. I think we're supposed to start Feel Good Club up. So I literally went onto eBay and bought an old sewing machine and a screen printer. And we were like, Google, how do you sew? How do you screen print T-shirts? I ran my mum and was like, will you come show us how to use the sewing machine? And we just started making T-shirts with this £500 from Airbnb. And I think it was about 6 months later, we opened the shop.
Yeah, so from that again, so yeah, like 6 months, probably about 6 months have gone by. So at my previous role, I'm not sure if you were here when I said, but I used to be Director of Happiness and People for a social media marketing agency. And I met an amazing man there called Atul. He was the interior designer, like in his 60s, such a lovely person. He always just says to me, whenever I say to him, I'll tell you why I always feel like we need to pay him back in a second. But whenever I say to him, like, how can we like repay you for how you've helped us? He's always just like, do something good for somebody else. That's his character and that's who he is, and he's a wonderful person. But we had an office in New York, and I was looking after the culture there as well. And he was doing a design on the office there. So me and him went to New York for a couple of days, and I told him about Feel Good Club and what we wanted to do. And I said, we want to have a physical space one day. One day I thought would be like in like 5 years' time. And he was like, okay, we'll make it happen then. So came home from New York. A couple of days later.
I'm at home sewing.
A couple of days later, he comes into the office and he says, I think I know the person who's going to like lend you the money to open it. So I was like, no. He was like, I know where it's going to be as well. The space is there. And I was like, no way. So I called Aimie. I was like, right, Atul said that he's sorted it for us. And I don't really know what that means, but...
I never even met Atul. I was like, who's Atul?
But you had met him. He took us, you'd met him once.
Literally for a quick coffee.
He asked whether he could take me and Aimie out for coffee, and we turned up, and it was his whole family, his daughters, their fiancés, the dogs, and we just came. We were just like felt so welcomed by their family, and they're great people. But so that was Amy's only time that she'd met him, and he was like, you need to send a business plan to this guy tomorrow.
Slipped you a number. I was like, ring Paul in 3 days with a business plan. And Kiera was like, oh, okay then.
So we went home, we Googled how to make a business plan.
We've actually got a sign in our office now with what we made ourselves with Google, and it says how to make a business plan.
Yeah.
Because that's how it all started.
But actually what the majority of the business plan was talking about what we wanted to create. It was imagery. It was almost like a vision board of what we wanted. And then like a little spreadsheet, like copied from Amy's like house spreadsheet of what we think, how many coffees we think we'd sell, how many events we think we could put on, and we showed Howard, and Howard went, okay, yeah, you can, I'll give you the money, and you can open it. And it was literally a couple of months, and we did not expect it whatsoever, and we definitely weren't ready for it. But it was an incredible experience of like highlight to like. We'd set it all up. We managed to get all of our furniture for £100 from a coffee shop that we're refurbing in London.
It actually cost us more to get the transport from London to Manchester than it did the actual furniture.
And we set it all up, and the bar was ready, and we were like a couple of days before opening, all like the stuff was still on the window so you couldn't see in. And we ordered a Deliveroo and like sat at the table, and it was just us, and we knew we were going to be hiring people soon. And one of the highlights is hiring people, because the incredible people that we've got with us is like, we're really lucky to have them with us. And we just sat and ate a Deliveroo, didn't we? And we were like, oh, so we're going to be doing this.
So that'll be 2 years in 2 weeks. It'll be 2 years since we opened the club. Yeah, and in between that's been, we now have 18 people on the team. We have an office, we have the shop, we have the book. We now have a dog. We're now dog mums as well. So yeah, I think once you, like, my thing is like, if you I know it sounds really cheesy and cliche, but like, I just knew it was the right thing to do. I just quit my full-time job and just knew like this was going to be something one day. And I think once you come to terms with that, you without realizing, you'll make small steps. And these people just come, like, I'm a big believer of like, if it's meant to be, it will be. And I think that our story proves just that. Like, we just met Atul, got the coffee shop, and now here we are.
We had it on the fridge. We had this little whiteboard on the fridge, and Aimie wrote on there, coffee shop, Northern Quarter, 2019. And it happened. And there's this thing like with manifesting and talk about manifesting.
Which is another buzzword.
And we'd read stuff like, we'd watched The Secret and stuff, and we'd watched all of that stuff. And, you know, I think manifesting it's a thing, but you have to take the action. But actually what I believe manifestation to be is believing that you can do something and that you'll get there. And then by believing in that, when you're faced with scenarios where you might be able to get a bit closer to doing it, you believe in yourself enough to say, yeah. I could have easily turned around when Atul said, I know the person, send the business plan. We could have easily turned around and gone, oh God, no, we don't know how to do that. We ain't going to be able to do it, or he's not going to lend us some money because we have no idea about the financials or how to run a hospitality business. But we believed that we could do it eventually, and I think that's what manifestation is. It's not just, it's like taking action and believing that you can do it.
Yeah, it was very quick.
Can't believe it's only been 2 years. On Saturday was a year of blunt knife in Edinburgh. If people don't know blunt knife, they're like a tiny little microcosm of a lot of what you're doing. They don't have a cafe, just over on Thistle Street, but a lot of the sort of message and the feeling and the sort of will to just make it happen is in there with the two of them. I'm conscious we're probably out of time. Do I have? Oh, we have 5 minutes. So there is time for a final burning question, if you have one. No. Oh, yeah.
Do you know how many times people literally walk in the coffee shop? So we have a little toy poodle, in case you don't know. She is mentioned in the book, actually. Like, in the little acknowledgements was like, Kiera Lawlor-Skillen. But yeah, people actually come like from all around the country, walk into the club and go to us, where's, like, to me and Kiera, where's Juno? And this one woman came in once and was like, oh, excuse me, is Juno here? Like, she didn't know who I was. And I was like, oh no, she's at home. She was like, oh, I'll come back tomorrow then. I was like, okay, bye, see you then.
People do that at Lighthouse. They're like, is Artemis here? And it's like, no, not today. And they turn around and they walk out.
We didn't know, because it'd never been, we didn't realise how dog-friendly Edinburgh was. And now I've just seen dogs everywhere. And we're like, we should have brought Juno, but it was...
Yeah, and Native is dog-friendly.
But we'll come back. When we open Edinburgh Feel Good Club, Juno will be in there all the time. Sorry.
Does anyone else have a final... Oh, yeah, go for it. Question
You've
about
just
dog
read our
clothing.
minds. We actually keep saying we need to do a Juno range. Yeah, like the Juno's Club. Like Juno will have her own separate dog club. And like at Manchester Coffee Shop, we'll have like dog club Sundays. And they'll all have like Juno coats on. But I just want a break. I just need a minute and then I might do that.
Well, there is... they're not going anywhere afterwards. So if you had a question you were too shy to ask, then you can come up and meet the two of them, get a book signed, ask them a question, stick around and enjoy the lovely space that is here, which leaves only to say a huge thank you for making the trip
Thank you so
up.
much. Thank you so much for making it happen. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much.